After 3 years of a business marriage, my wife Willow asked me to attend a party on her behalf for the first time, citing overtime as an excuse. Unexpectedly, my friend snapped a photo of her having dinner with her first love, who had just returned to the country. What Willow didn't expect was that not only did I remain strangely calm, but I was also indifferent to her attempt to explain herself. It wasn't until she saw me casually embracing a beautiful woman at a gathering that she, with her lack of boundaries, began to panic for the first time. Chapter 1. The party was over. My wife, who had originally promised to come pick me up, had yet to show up. It had started drizzling outside. No one answered my phone call. The last message on WeChat was still the one I'd sent. The event ends in 10 minutes. Where are you? The guests who had attended the party began to leave one by one. George, has your wife not shown up yet? How about I give you a ride? A familiar attendee kindly asked. I waved my hand, forcing a smile. No need. She's probably stuck in traffic. You guys go ahead. I smiled on the outside, but inside, the anger was steadily growing. Last night, Willow had taken time out of her busy schedule to ask me for a favor. She still had work to do. She wanted me to attend the party on her behalf. She said she would come pick me up after the event ended. I didn't hesitate. I agreed. But after waiting another half hour, my patience was completely drained. I was ready to call a cab myself. Just as I was pulling out my phone, I saw a message from Willow. I'm still working. Just call a cab yourself. I didn't reply. I should have expected this. The night breeze calmed me slightly, and I felt a little sober. On my way home, I received a message from David. Fool, guess where I am right now? I replied with a voice message. I'll punch you straight in the face if you don't stop messing around. A short while later, David sent me a video. The background showed a lavishly decorated upscale restaurant. Under the dim, suggestive lighting, I could clearly see a woman sitting at a table not far away. I recognized her at a glance. It was my wife, Willow. She was wearing a relaxed smile, one I hadn't seen in a long time. She was sitting across from a man. It was hard to make out his features. David's voice, smug as always, came through the video. Didn't expect Makoto to come back. Heard he just landed tonight. You should be careful. Huh. So it turns out true love is back in town. No wonder she didn't have time to attend the party. Makoto, Willow's high school sweetheart. They broke up in their third year of university. He had occupied the entirety of her best years. David and I knew because we were in the class next door back then. I asked David to take 2 clear photos for me. Then I casually forwarded them to Willow. No explanation, no apology, not even a typing notification. I didn't care anymore. Our marriage had always been a transaction. I turned off my phone and leaned back in the car seat, closing my eyes. 3 years ago, Willow and I both crossed the threshold of 30 under pressure from both our families. We got our marriage certificate. The wedding was grand, a perfect match, a strong union in the eyes of everyone. After marriage, she focused on her career and I ran my company. We lived under the same roof, but we might as well have been roommates. We gave each other enough personal space. There was no love to speak of, but there was no conflict either. Willow always thought this was fine, but I didn't think so. It didn't feel like home. I got home and opened the door. The house was pitch dark. I pulled off my tie and poured myself a glass of ice water. The cold water slid down my throat, momentarily suppressing the discomfort rising in my stomach. After a shower, I heard the sound of rain hitting the window. The sound grew louder, as if the sky was pouring down. It hit the glass with a patter. I wiped my hair dry when my phone rang. It was a message from Willow. The rain is too heavy. I might not be able to make it back tonight. Just wanted to let you know. It didn't make sense. She had already been caught in her lie, and now this. I shook my head and didn't respond. Perfect match, destined couple. The wedding host's words echoed in my ears. The Liu family needed the Wang family's connections in politics, while the Wang family valued the Liu family's business resources. I was Mr. Wang and Willow Liu. We were nothing more than the most presentable tokens in this transaction. I thought feelings could develop and a home could be built. 3 years had passed. I tried to get closer, but she always maintained the perfect distance. She played the role of roommate flawlessly. I had once held out a small hope for her. But after her deceit, That hope was completely shattered. Chapter 2. The sky was just beginning to lighten. I was still wrapped in the blanket, deep in sleep. Suddenly, I was awoken by the sounds coming from the hallway. From the sound, it seemed like Willow had come back. It was ridiculous. It was barely past 5. If she had chosen to spend the night out, she might as well have stayed out until she was well rested before coming back. She opened the door, stepped in, and stood by the bed. I could feel her gaze on me, but still not fully awake, I ignored her. She stood there for a while, then suddenly reached out to pull my blanket. I opened my eyes and swatted her hand away, pulling the blanket back over me. "It's bad to sleep with your head covered," Willow said in a stiff tone. I muttered crazy under my breath, shot her a glance, and turned over to continue sleeping. Willow had dark circles under her eyes, her hair a bit messy. She was still wearing the same clothes from yesterday, carrying the smell of the outdoors. It seemed like she hadn't expected my reaction. "I was just trying to fix your blanket," she said before retreating from the room. I slept until the sun was high in the sky. In the living room, Willow had changed into her loungewear and was having breakfast. It seemed like she, like me, had only just gotten up. "Don't you want to explain what happened last night?" I pulled out a chair and sat down. She paused her movements, looked up at me, and said, "Makoto just came back to the country. We haven't seen each other in years. We just had a simple meal. As for lying to you, I just didn't want to explain further, so you wouldn't overthink it. So last night you two went to a hotel?" Willow set down her spoon and frowned slightly. "George, don't say things like that. Once the rain eases, I'll head back." I nodded, picked up the glass of water on the table, took a sip, and said calmly, "All right, got it." My calm reaction, instead of the expected argument or questions, seemed to surprise Willow. She looked at me, trying to find even the slightest trace of anger or hurt on my face. But she found nothing. I picked up a slice of toast and slowly spread some jam on it. My attention completely focused on breakfast. "You don't have anything else to say?" Willow finally couldn't help but ask, her voice tinged with uncertainty. I glanced up at her, forced a polite smile, and said, "Say what? Should I wish you a pleasant meal?" Willow was stunned. She opened her mouth, but in the end said nothing. She lowered her head and silently continued eating her porridge. Chapter 3. From that day on, some things quietly changed. I no longer made a point of waiting for Willow to come home for dinner at the usual time. When work at the company got busy, I simply ate at the company cafeteria. Afterward, I might even spend some time at the gym. By the time I got home, it was often already 8 or 9 o'clock. Willow seemed to notice this change. At first, she probably thought I was sulking. She would still, as usual, send me a WeChat message if I wasn't home by 7, asking, "Are you coming home for dinner?" My replies were always brief and delayed. "Busy, you eat first." Or I would just reply after a few hours. Once I was already home, "I've eaten." After a few times, she stopped asking. On the weekend, not wanting to stay at home, I called up David. As soon as I got out of the car, 2 girls dressed in JK uniforms surrounded me. They both smiled sweetly and said in unison, "Hello, George." I was completely confused. I was sure I had never seen these 2 girls before. "Hello, do we know each other?" They didn't answer. Instead, they walked up to me, one on each side, and hooked their arms around mine. My arms were immediately trapped between 2 deep valleys. "Huh, what are you doing?" "Don't worry. Handsome, we're here to pick you up. Mr. David sent us." "What the hell? What's this idiot David trying to do?" 5 minutes later, I sat down across from David. He had 2 more JK girls sitting next to him. He smugly puffed on his cigarette and said, "So what do you think of the arrangement?" "Don't worry, they're all over 18, I replied irritably. "Are you out of your mind? What the hell is this stunt?" I glanced around. Quite a few people were looking over curiously, whispering and pointing. Some with disdain, and a few with that look of envy that men understand. The restaurant David chose had a unique atmosphere, but unfortunately, there were no private rooms. Only what they called booth seating to separate everyone. David wasn't bothered by my complaints. He blew out a smoke ring, grinning like a fool, and said, "Come on, I noticed you've been in a bad mood lately, so I thought I'd bring a couple of girls to cheer you up. Life is short. Enjoy it while you can. Got it? And besides, Willow already crossed the line. What are you afraid of? Is it only okay for her to start the fire, but not for you to light a lamp? David continued. The two girls next to him were obediently pouring tea and handing him fruit, and the two girls next to me were deliberately leaning against me. I snapped. You're the fool. What's with all this showiness in the middle of the day? Can't you pick a place with a private room? I gave David a look and didn't bother arguing with him. After all, this guy's been like this since he was a kid. I took the tea the girl on my right offered and said thanks. David sat back with his legs crossed, acting like a boss, and said, Now that's more like it. I told you back when I asked you to stay single with me. You didn't listen. Now look at me. I've been through the flowers, and not a single petal touches me. So carefree. I chuckled, picked up some pumpkin pie with my chopsticks, and said, Who are you kidding? Everyone knows you're a mama's boy. If your mom found out, she'd break your legs. She won't find out. I've got it all under control, David said proudly, pulling the girl next to him closer. My brother's third kid was born. My mom doesn't have time for me anymore. She's busy all day with the little ones running around with my old man. He didn't finish his sentence. The waiter led two new customers past our booth. I instinctively looked up and froze. The man in front was dressed in a suit, his demeanor gentle, Makoto. Following him was a woman in a well-tailored beige trench coat, her expression cold and aloof. It was Willow. The waiter showed them to a booth diagonally opposite us. Makoto, ever the gentleman, pulled out the chair for Willow. She gave a slight nod before sitting down, her side profile facing our direction. David saw them too. His mouth dropped into an O shape and the peanut he had just picked up fell back into the bowl. He muttered, What the hell? And used his lips to silently say to me, What kind of fate is this? I paused for a moment, holding my teacup before averting my gaze and replying, What's there to look at? Eat your food. The two JK girls beside me noticed the shift in atmosphere and became more reserved. They stopped leaning into me. David also stopped his playful antics. His eyes bounced between our table and the one diagonally opposite. An expression of excitement and nervousness plastered on his face, waiting for the drama to unfold. I continued eating, acting as if everything was normal. I never expected to run into them here after leaving home today. Truly fate at work. TSK. David leaned in, speaking in almost a whisper. Do you want me to go over and say hello for you? I didn't even look up and replied. Are you an idiot? Eat your food. Just then, Willow seemed to sense something. She turned her head toward our direction. Her gaze first swept over David and the two girls next to him, a subtle look of disdain flashing across her face. Then it landed on me. We locked eyes from across the tables. The restaurant's noisy background sounds seemed to disappear in that moment. For a brief second, I saw a flash of surprise in her eyes. Then a scrutinizing look followed. Her gaze lingered on my face for a moment before drifting to the two young girls in JK uniforms sitting on either side of me. Her brows furrowed imperceptibly. Her expression quickly turned cold, as if coated in a layer of thin ice. I met her gaze, not looking away. I simply stared at her. Even the corners of my mouth curled into a faint, elusive smile. Chapter 4. The eye contact between Willow and me lasted only a few seconds. She was the first to look away, turning back to say something to Makoto. Makoto followed her gaze and turned to look at me. He froze for a moment when he saw me. Then he gave an awkward yet polite smile, nodding slightly in acknowledgement. I tugged at the corner of my mouth, offering a response. Damn, how does he still have the nerve to smile? David muttered under his breath, clearly upset. Eat, I said, pulling my gaze away and picking up my chopsticks to grab a piece of pork rib, as if the brief exchange had never happened. But the atmosphere at the table had undeniably changed. David stopped his casual chatter. The two girls beside him also sensed the shift in mood and ate quietly, aware of the tension. Across from us, I could vaguely hear the conversation between Willow and Makoto. I couldn't make out the words, but I could see that Makoto was speaking calmly, using hand gestures, while Willow nodded occasionally. The atmosphere appeared friendly and relaxed. I ate quickly. The rice in my bowl soon reached the bottom. Full? David asked. Yeah, let's go. I wiped my mouth with a napkin and stood up. As I passed Willow's table, I didn't stop or glance at her, walking straight past. David followed behind me, intentionally slowing his pace. His eyes lingered on Willow and Makoto, giving a small snicker. Once we were out of the restaurant, the afternoon sunlight was a bit harsh. David cursed as he lit a cigarette. Damn, what bad luck. Ran into that pair of dog lovers while eating. George, can you really stand this? I looked at him, suddenly smiling, and asked, what should I do? Rush over and flip the table. It's just a business marriage. I clapped David on the shoulder, my tone light. We're essentially business partners. As long as it doesn't affect the company or the family's reputation, let her be happy. Do you want me to help you file for divorce? Didn't your prenup say whoever cheats gets nothing? I can introduce you to a private investigator. I'll help you take her company. After all, I did study law for a while. Better not. I'm afraid you'd end up sending us both to jail. I interrupted. Thanks for today, but don't go pulling stunts like this again. If you must, at least pick a place with more privacy. I patted his shoulder and turned to walk toward my car. Through the rearview mirror, I saw David standing there, scratching his head and looking gloomy. Back home, surprisingly, Willow had gotten home before me. She had just taken off her coat, and we locked eyes. I changed my shoes, not intending to talk to her, and walked straight toward the bedroom. George, she called out to stop me. I stopped, turned to look at her, and asked, what is it? Her gaze was on me, scrutinizing with a hint of displeasure. Are you not going to explain anything? Explain what? I leaned against the wall in the hallway, my tone indifferent. Today I just had a simple meal with David. Don't overthink it. Her words felt strangely familiar. Sure enough, Willow's expression darkened immediately. I looked at her and suddenly found it amusing. Makoto and I are just normal friends meeting up. But your meeting with David wasn't normal. Those young girls beside you were clearly no good. Willow's tone rose sharply, filled with clear anger. What? Is it only okay for you to meet with your ex in a high-end restaurant, reminiscing about the good old days? I meet with a friend for a simple meal, and 2 waitresses are serving tea, and that's wrong. I chuckled lightly. George, we need to talk. What about Makoto? We are truly just friends. He just returned to the country, and he's unfamiliar with the domestic market. I'm just giving him advice as a friend, she tried to explain. I nodded. I believe you. My response caught her off guard again. She probably expected an argument, questions, or even sarcasm. But she certainly didn't expect me to be this indifferent. So you don't need to get back at me by messing around with David, she finally said, stating what she had been trying to say. You're overthinking it. I don't have the time for such childish games. I've just figured things out, I said. I didn't look at her complicated expression anymore. I turned and walked into the bedroom. Chapter 5. That night, I didn't sleep well. Half awake, I seemed to hear the master bedroom door open and close a few times. There were faint footsteps lingering in the hallway. I knew it was Willow. In the days that followed, we entered a full-blown Cold War mode. Or perhaps it was a new phase for us. Willow went to stay at her parents' house. She didn't formally tell me. One day, when I came home from work, I saw her with a small suitcase driving off without a word. I didn't call to ask. Before going to bed that night, I received a brief message from her on WeChat. Busy with work recently, staying at my parents' place for a few days to make it easier to work overtime. I stared at the screen. Finally, I typed just one word. Okay. For a while, the screen showed, the other party is typing. But in the end, nothing else came through. Well, that saved us from unnecessary back and forth. The atmosphere at home grew even colder. I started pouring more time into work, and my interactions with David also became less frequent. That day, David's call came at just the right time with a noisy background. Where are you living it up? I'm throwing a get-together tonight. You in? Working overtime tonight, I replied succinctly. No way. Weren't you the one who hated working overtime the most? I've got some proper girls tonight from the art school, guaranteed fresh and elegant. Really? Working overtime? The project is important. I cut him off. Next time for sure. There was a brief silence on the other end. Then David's tone became a bit more serious. All right, you take care of your work. Just let me know if you need anything. After hanging up, I leaned back in my chair. The internal phone rang, It was my assistant. Mr. Wong, Mr. Makoto Ito, didn't have an appointment, but said he needed to see you. Should I let him in? Makoto? What was he here for? I hesitated for a moment before saying, let him in. Makoto walked in, still carrying his usual refined demeanor, wearing a well-fitted custom suit and offering a perfectly measured smile. Mr. Wong, sorry to disturb you, he said, sitting across from me. Mr. Ito, no need for formalities. What brings you here today? I asked directly, not interested in small talk. He smiled and relaxed, saying, actually, it's not a big deal. I just met with Willow, and since I'm nearby, I thought I'd stop by to say hello. After all, we're both alumni. So he was here to provoke me, calling Willow so familiarly. I raised an eyebrow. You just met with my wife? It seems your relationship with her is quite special. Makoto Ito leaned forward slightly. His hands folded in his lap. He gave a flawless smile and said, it's nothing like that. We're just friends. The air in the office seemed to freeze for a few seconds. I leaned back in my chair, lightly tapping my fingertips on the wooden desk. I didn't speak. Makoto's smile faltered slightly, but his demeanor remained composed. I think there may be some misunderstanding between us. Willow is just someone who values deep connections, especially since we've known each other for so long. I gave a light chuckle. I picked up the pen on the desk and casually played with it, signaling for him to continue. He sighed. Actually, I'm here today to speak on Willow's behalf. She can be a bit too strong-willed sometimes, not knowing when to show weakness. But in marriage, someone has to be the first to back down. I nodded. Mr. Ito, as an ex, are you offering me advice? Makoto, seeing my indifferent response, stood up, his enthusiasm fading. Mr. Wong, please don't misunderstand. As mutual friends, I just don't want to see you two fighting over trivial matters. Don't worry about it. I pressed the internal phone and said, show him out. The dismissal was clear and final. Makoto's smile finally slipped away. I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. Makoto's figure soon appeared at the building's exit. He stood on the roadside, making a phone call, then hailed a taxi and left. Chapter 6. At 8 in the evening, I drove home. The garage was empty. Willow's parking spot was still vacant. I loosened my tie, planning to take a shower first and then grab a quick bite to eat. To my surprise, Willow was home, and she was sitting on the sofa in the living room, seemingly waiting for me. With a serious expression, she spoke up, George, we need to talk. I sat down on the single chair opposite her and asked, talk about what? Did Makoto come to see you today? She asked, not as a question, but more as a confirmation. She was well informed. It seemed that after Makoto left my place, he got in touch with her. Yeah, your ex was quite enthusiastic. He even brought fruit. I smiled as if reminiscing about the scene from earlier that afternoon. What did you talk about? Willow asked, frowning as she pressed on. Not much, just that your ex was a little impatient and asked when I was planning to divorce you. Willow's face instantly turned pale. She stood up abruptly. How could he say such a thing? George, there's a limit to the lies you can tell. Believe it or not, I said nonchalantly, crossing my legs. He even said, as an old friend, that I should be generous and not stand in the way of you finding a second spring. Willow's chest heaved as she was clearly enraged by my words. George, her voice trembled with anger. Makoto is absolutely not like that. How could he what? I interrupted her. He even dared to provoke me in person, saying that only the one who isn't loved is the third party. He also said that the night he came back, you left me and went to find him, and that was the best proof. He even said that with one phone call, you'd go running to him no matter the weather. Can't believe this ex of yours, over 30, still has such an attraction to you. No wonder after 3 years of marriage, you've always been lukewarm toward me. Turns out you two have always been keeping some sort of connection. I just don't get it. Since you're so deeply in love, why break up in the first place? Was it only interesting to get divorced in your 30s and then remarry? Or maybe your ex has had enough fun and is now back to pick up the pieces. Willow was overwhelmed by my barrage of malicious fabrications. Her face shifted from pale to green, her lips trembling as she tried to speak, but was repeatedly shut down by the rising volume of my words. Until I finished the last harsh accusation, the living room fell into a deadly silence, only broken by her heavy breathing filled with anger and shock. You're lying. She finally found her voice, shaking with disbelief. George, are you crazy? How could Makoto say something like that? You're slandering him. Slandering? I sneered, shrugged, and said, believe what you want. The words have been said. Whether you believe them or not is up to you. Maybe you can call your old friend right now, confront him, and ask if he's in a hurry to play the role of the rescuer. Willow stared at me, her eyes full of unfamiliarity and a burning anger for being humiliated. She seemed to be trying to find even the slightest sign of a lie on my face. But all she saw was cold indifference and mockery. Willow grabbed her handbag from the sofa. You're impossible. Throwing this phrase at me, she turned and quickly walked toward the entrance. The sound of her high heels striking the floor echoed harshly in the empty living room. Bang! The front door was slammed shut. I walked expressionlessly over to the bar and poured myself a glass of whiskey. The ice cubes clinked lightly in the glass. Chapter 7. That night, Willow didn't come back. It seemed like we were stuck in some strange standoff. A relative asked in the family WeChat group. I simply explained that Willow had a major project at work and was staying at her parents' house to make it easier to work overtime. She didn't contradict me, maintaining her silence. David invited me a few times. I turned him down, citing work commitments. He probably heard something because on the phone he sighed, George, why do this? How about I come over and have a drink with you? It's really nothing, just been busy lately, I said, keeping my tone light. I'll reach out when things settle down. After hanging up, I looked at the overcast sky outside. It was about to rain. A week later, I represented the company at an important industry summit. At such an event, ideally, a couple should attend together. But I went alone. The organizers still seated me and Willow at the same table. It really felt like bad luck had found its way to me. Willow had come with Makoto. She was wearing a silver evening gown. Makoto, in his suit, stood beside her, smiling as though he had the world at his feet. The people at the table immediately became awkward. Willow saw me. Her face turned pale, and she instinctively moved to change seats. But Makoto, the gentleman, pulled the chair out for her, speaking softly. Willow, sit here. It has a better view. I scoffed and sat down on my seat. I couldn't be bothered to look at them. Halfway through the dinner, the waiter began serving hot soup. When a bowl of mushroom chicken soup was placed in front of Willow, she suddenly covered her mouth and gagged lightly. Though it was subtle, the whole table fell silent. All eyes turned to her. Makoto quickly handed her a glass of water, gently patting her back, and asked with concern, Are you all right? Is it because you've been working too hard lately? The tone, the gestures, he acted like a husband-to-be. One oblivious boss at the table smiled and joked. Miss Liu is there. Good news? Congratulations, Mr. Wong. Congratulations, my ass. I put my chopsticks down, grabbed a napkin, and wiped my mouth. Looking at Willow, whose face had gone white, I spoke in a low voice, but loud enough for the whole table to hear. Is that so? Well, we should figure out if it's just a bad stomach or if we're congratulating someone for being pregnant. After all, I paused, my gaze sweeping over Makoto's frozen face. What if it's just a bad stomach? The table fell into dead silence. The boss who had congratulated us turned several shades of red and white, embarrassed to the point of wishing he could crawl under the table. I stood up, tugged at my tie, and gave the group a polite smile. Sorry, everyone. Please enjoy your meal. I'm feeling a bit sick, so I'll excuse myself. Behind me, there was a dead silence. Then suppressed murmurs broke out. I walked out of the banquet hall without looking back. As soon as I sat in the car, my phone started vibrating wildly. Willow's name flashed on the screen. I hit the mute button and started the engine. I hadn't driven far when I saw Willow at the intersection. She was wearing a thin evening dress, standing in the night wind, looking paler than a ghost. She saw my car and immediately rushed over, blocking the way. I slammed on the brakes. She pounded on my car window, completely losing her composure. George, get out of the car. Let's clear this up. I rolled down the window and looked at her coldly. Clear what? What was that remark you made in front of everyone? She demanded. I stared at her impassively, not intending to open the car door. Did I say anything wrong? Isn't it just a bad stomach? You can't really be pregnant, can you? I've been almost a year post-vasectomy, I said nonchalantly. Clink. Willow's phone fell to the ground, making a sharp, piercing sound. She stared at me in disbelief, her lips trembling, unable to speak. Is it true? When did you? Her voice quivered, the rest of the words barely leaving her lips. Vasectomy? Yeah, it's true, I said casually. No, it's impossible. You can't have had a vasectomy. Her eyes went blank, and she murmured to herself. She suddenly looked up at me, her expression frantic. That joke is not funny at all. I stopped smiling, my eyes turning cold. I'm not joking. So what are you going to do about the bastard child in your belly? Bastard child, she repeated the words, her voice hoarse, laced with disbelief and absurdity. George, do you even know what you're saying? I said the child in your belly is a bastard, I said calmly, even adding a hint of cruel amusement, emphasizing each word. You're lying. I'm not pregnant. Willow finally found her voice again after the overwhelming shock. And how could I be pregnant? As husband and wife, you went behind my back and got a vasectomy without my consent. I looked at her, suddenly feeling a sense of boredom. This game of mutual harm didn't bring the satisfaction I had expected. If you're not pregnant, just go to the hospital and get checked, I said coldly, gripping the steering wheel again. Move aside, I'm leaving. Willow didn't stop me. She just stood there, staring vacantly at my car. I rolled up the window, shutting out everything from the outside and shutting out her disturbing gaze as well. I stepped on the gas, and the car drove off. Chapter 8. The phone rang. It was David again. I put down the file in my hand and answered the call. Damn, you're awesome, George, he shouted excitedly on the other end. Guess who I just saw outside the gynecology and obstetrics clinic? Willow. I paused with a glass of wine in my hand, then asked, what was she doing there? I don't know. She looked pale as a ghost, totally distracted. She came out of there and nearly bumped into the door. David sounded excited, like a kid in a melon patch. Do you think she might be pregnant? With your child? None of my business. What if it's yours? You're a jerk, but I still acknowledge your fertility in that department. Go to hell. I hung up the phone. The irritation inside me couldn't be suppressed anymore. The gynecology and obstetrics clinic. The last time we had sex was over 2 months ago. Could it be, did I really get cuckolded? The next few days passed quietly. Willow didn't return home, and she didn't call. Work was still busy, but there was a constant vague frustration lingering inside me, something I couldn't quite put into words. In the afternoon, I received a call from my mother-in-law. George, come over for dinner tonight. Your dad caught a big fish today and insists on showing off his cooking skills, my mother-in-law said, sounding amused. I rubbed my temples and replied, Mom, I might not be able to make it tonight. I have something to do. She responded with dissatisfaction. What's more important than coming home for dinner? How long has it been since you last visited us? And Willow's been back for who knows how long, and you still haven't brought her back home. My mother-in-law's call left me no choice but to agree. I finally agreed to go over for dinner that night. When I arrived at the Liu family villa and parked the car, I took a deep breath, adjusted my expression, and walked inside. The moment I entered, I sensed something was off. In the living room, not only were my in-laws sitting, but my parents were also there. The 4 elders were gathered around, not quite serious, but certainly not in the relaxed mood of a casual family dinner. Willow was sitting on a single sofa a little farther away, her eyes lowered, holding a glass of water, her fingertips slightly white from gripping it. She didn't look at me. My heart sank. I understood immediately. This wasn't just a simple family dinner. This was a family tribunal. I greeted everyone in turn, trying to sound natural. George is here. Sit down. We've been waiting for you, my mother-in-law said with a smile, though it seemed forced. My parents exchanged a glance, their expressions complex. My mother-in-law had prepared a large meal. The big fish that my father-in-law was so proud of had been steamed and placed in the center of the table, still steaming. At the dinner table, My father-in-law couldn't stop boasting about his catch, which weighed around 200 pounds. My mother-in-law also made an effort to find topics to talk about, asking questions from the weather to the latest news, trying to lighten the mood. Finally, after I set down my chopsticks and took the tea my mother-in-law handed me, my mother couldn't hold back anymore. She set down the teacup. The sound of the porcelain clinking broke the forced silence. "George," my mother looked at me, her voice heavy with suppressed emotion. "We called you here today mainly to ask, what's really going on with you and Willow?" Here it comes. I didn't speak. I just picked up the teacup and took a sip, waiting for more. My mother-in-law sighed and took over. "George, Willow has told us that vasectomy. Is it really true?" Her tone carried the last bit of hope, as though she wanted to hear denial. I looked up at Willow. She lifted her head, and our eyes met. The anger and coldness that had once been in those eyes were gone, replaced by deep exhaustion and an indescribable sadness I couldn't read. "George, say something." My father's voice was stern. "How could you do such a thing? This is such a big deal. Why didn't you discuss it with Willow? Why didn't you tell us? Do you even care about this family anymore?" Facing my parents' accusations, I looked at Willow and slowly spoke, my voice calm and steady. "Is this what you've gathered all of us here for today? Just to ask this? Isn't this a big deal?" My mother raised her voice. "You're both in your 30s. Are you just going to give up on having kids? What do you want Willow to do? What about our family's reputations?" The pressure felt like a tidal wave crashing down on me. The eyes of all four elders were fixed on me. Willow, though her head was lowered, had tense shoulders, clearly waiting for my answer. Suddenly, I found it somewhat laughable and tiring. I set my teacup down, leaned back into my chair, and let my gaze sweep across everyone in the room, finally resting on Willow's pale profile. "I lied to her," I said, my voice low, but it clearly echoed through the quiet dining room. "What?" My mother was stunned. Willow shot up, staring at me in disbelief. I tugged at the corner of my mouth, a self-deprecating smile forming. I said the vasectomy was real. I made it up to piss her off. The lie had originally just been a way to provoke Willow. I hadn't expected it to cause ripples far beyond what I had anticipated. The room fell into a few seconds of dead silence. What did you say?" Willow's voice was dry and trembling. She gripped the edge of the table, slowly standing up. Her eyes locked onto mine, wide with disbelief. "George, say it again." I said I didn't have a vasectomy. I stared into her eyes, repeating each word slowly. "I made it all up." Chapter 9. Bang! My mother slammed her hand on the table, her voice both furious and urgent. "You child, can you just say whatever comes to your mind like that? Do you even know?" "Know what?" I interrupted, my tone edged with suppressed frustration. My gaze shifted to Willow. "Then why don't you ask her why she felt guilty enough to go to the obstetrics and gynecology department? Isn't the reason obvious? Her ex comes back and rushes to see her, and she lies to me, saying she's working late. She spends all her time with her ex and tells me they're just friends." "No!" Willow's voice suddenly shot up. Her body started shaking uncontrollably, and tears flooded down her face without warning. "I went to the hospital because I thought you really had a vasectomy." Her words left everyone stunned. "I haven't done anything wrong. I'm not pregnant, but I was scared. I was scared that if I did get pregnant and you had a vasectomy, who would the child belong to? That stain couldn't be washed away. I had to get it checked." I watched as she frantically pulled a folded paper from her bag and slapped it down on the table. "This is the checkup report. I'm not pregnant." She cried out, her voice full of hurt and anger. I even asked the doctor. I asked her if a wife could still naturally get pregnant after her husband has had a vasectomy. The doctor told me that reversing a vasectomy is risky, and it could mean losing the ability to have children forever. She cried so hard she could barely breathe. Her makeup was a mess. Both my parents and Willow's parents stood frozen, glancing between me and Willow, who was on the verge of passing out from crying. My mother-in-law rushed over to hug her. Willow raised her tear-filled eyes and glared at me with intensity. "George, all I could think about was what if you really couldn't have kids anymore? What would we do? What would our family do? What if we want children in the future?" What we do then? I never even considered divorcing you over this. But you're using such a vicious lie to play with me, to get back at me. My mother opened her mouth to say something, but it turned into a sigh instead. I sat silently in my chair, not speaking. That sense of irritation in me strangely calmed down. Yes, it was wrong of me to lie to you. I spoke, my voice eerily calm. But can you ask yourself honestly, why did I lie to you? The day Makoto came back, you said you were working late. But what happened? You had dinner with him until midnight, and then used the rain as an excuse to not come home. You go out with my friends on weekends and bring your ex along to discuss me. And now he shows up at my company lecturing me on how to be your husband under the guise of an old friend. At that industry summit banquet, you two were so close that anyone who didn't know would think you and Makoto were married. Each sentence I said made Willow's face turn a little paler. Willow, even a clay figure has its limits. Do you really think I have no temper? The restaurant fell into a deathly silence. My parents and her parents exchanged glances, their initial anger and accusations slowly replaced by a complex mix of embarrassment and realization. They finally understood. This wasn't just about the lie of the vasectomy. It was about the deep-rooted issues that had piled up over time, finally exploding. My mother-in-law tightened her arm around Willow's shoulders, her gaze toward me full of reproach, but more so with helplessness. My father-in-law sighed heavily, picked up a cigarette from the table, and then irritably set it down again. My father furrowed his brow, while my mother hesitated, her words unspoken. Willow pulled away from her mother-in-law's embrace, wiping at her tear-streaked face, her eyes swollen and red. Yes, I admit that I mishandled things with Makoto. I ignored your feelings. Her voice was still hoarse, but there was a determined tone in it. I lied to you about working late, and it was my mistake to meet him frequently and make you uncomfortable. But I never ever thought about betraying our marriage, and I never thought about leaving. I thought we just needed more time to adjust. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her emotions. He just came back to the country, and there were a lot of things he needed help with. I admit I was fuzzy about boundaries, which made you misunderstand. But I swear there is absolutely nothing between me and him. My mother-in-law opened her mouth to speak, but was stopped by a look from my father-in-law. My parents also stayed silent. They realized that the argument at this moment needed to be resolved by the people involved. I looked at Willow. Her defiance and hurt in her eyes didn't seem fake. The anger in my chest was strangely doused by her tears, leaving only deep, overwhelming fatigue. Chapter 10, Time to Adjust. I repeated her words with a tone of mockery, but with less of the sharpness I had before. 3 years, Willow. Haven't I given you enough time? I tried to get close, but you kept pushing me away with your independence and boundaries. Makoto comes back, and you sure use your time and boundaries all on him. Don't even say I lied to you. In the end, it's still you and Makoto who are unclear with each other. I didn't go up and beat him up. That's already me giving you face. Willow's lips moved, but no sound came out. She stared at me like I was a stranger. So in your mind, Makoto and I must have had something going on, right? Her voice was soft, numb. I didn't respond. I simply let her assumptions stand. My parents and her parents looked grim, but no one spoke up. This mess was something only we could handle. George, you're such a bastard. She didn't look at me again, turning instead to the 4 elders and deeply bowing. Don't you realize that? And now you're here, making a scene in my office. He glared at me, his chest heaving. George, don't be so smug. Willow was just momentarily deceived by you. She'll see the truth soon enough. Really? I set down my pen and stood up, locking eyes with him across the desk. You're in your 30s, yet you're still so shameless. Willow and I are married. How could you have the audacity to say something like that in front of me? Makoto was choked by my words, his face flashing between blue and white. I walked around the desk, stood in front of him, and patted his shoulder with a sincere tone. Mr. Ito, let me offer you a piece of advice. Don't go after another man's wife. It's immoral. And besides, I leaned in close to his ear, lowering my voice. How do you know she blocked you not because she finally saw through you and found you disgusting? Makoto shoved me away violently, his eyes full of murderous intent. "You, please show Mr. Ito out." I pressed the intercom button. This time, Makoto was escorted out by security. When I got home that evening, the hallway light was on. I froze for a moment. Willow was sitting on the living room sofa, wearing loungewear. Her hair was damp, as if she'd just taken a shower. She didn't look at me, staring at the TV screen. But the screen was blank. I changed my shoes without saying a word. I walked straight into the kitchen to get some water. I moved back in. She spoke suddenly, her voice flat. She finally turned to look at me. Her eyes were still a bit puffy, but her expression was calm. "Did Makoto come to see you today?" "Yeah." "What did he say?" "Nothing new." I took a sip of water. Then I casually started to talk nonsense. He told me to step aside and let him take my place. He said I exposed him and caused him to be blocked. I told him not to keep chasing someone else's wife. It's immoral. But he said that a goal scored by the goalkeeper makes the game more exciting. I've never met anyone so shameless. And he's an overseas returnee. Ugh, disgusting. Willow's expression darkened visibly, but she didn't react with the same heated retort as before. Instead, her hand, resting on her knee, subtly tightened around the fabric of her loungewear. Did he really say that? Her voice carried no detectable emotion. Does it matter? I threw the question back at her and walked over to the other end of the couch. Anyway, you've blocked him, haven't you? Willow fell silent for a few seconds before softly replying, I made it clear to him, she added, that from now on it's just strictly work and we won't meet privately anymore. She paused before adding, if there's any future work to discuss. It felt like an explanation, a concession. But the vague, unresolved frustration in my chest didn't dissipate. Trust is like a piece of paper. The creases aren't so easily smoothed out. Do whatever you want, I muttered, picking up the remote and turning on the TV. The sound of business news filled the silence of the living room, but it only made the atmosphere feel emptier. It was as if life had returned to square one. But some things were definitely different. Even when we slept in the same bed, it felt like there was an invisible chasm between us. Time, like a dull knife, slowly passed another month. David had wisely stopped asking me out. He only sent jokes and humorous snippets over WeChat. Willow no longer brought up Makoto. She even started reducing unnecessary social engagements, coming home on time more often after work. Occasionally, she would try to start a conversation, something about a new company project or a newly opened restaurant. I usually gave brief responses, and the conversation would falter, the air once again growing thick with silence. We both knew that crack between us couldn't be mended just by avoiding the subject or pretending to be at peace. We were both trapped in this marriage, bound by family interests, appearances, and that small shred of reluctance and unresolved resignation. The rain stopped. I suddenly said, looking at the gradually clearing night sky. Willow followed my gaze, responding quietly, Dad asked me yesterday when we're planning on having kids, she said suddenly, her voice light, almost as if speaking to the air. I turned to look at her, asking, what did you say? I said, whenever it happens, she smiled wryly, a touch of self-mockery in her tone. He seemed a little disappointed. I didn't respond, glancing at my phone instead. David had just sent me a business card. George, she finally turned to face me, her eyes filled with a complex expression. Are we just like this now? Her question was vague, but we both knew what it meant. I stared at the city's neon lights in the distance, silent for a long while. I don't know. The light in Willow's eyes dimmed slightly. She didn't say anything else, turning and heading toward the bedroom. After a few steps, she stopped, not turning back as she spoke. Flight Monday at 9 a.m. No need to see me off. A 2-day business trip, she added. Then she shut the bedroom door.